welcome back to another episode of Doodling Through Education. Today we have another history episode for my CC students. It's going to be week 19 foundations memory work that this is supplementing and expanding on. So today we are going to talk about the Korean War, and specifically how General MacArthur led the United Nations forces to stop communist control of South Korea. So before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone to subscribe to Doodling Through Education so you don't ever miss an episode. And on that note, let's go ahead and start doodling. The first thing we need to talk about in the Korean War is how did it start? The Korean War began on June 25th, 1950, when around 75,000 North Korean soldiers crossed the border between North and South Korea, invading the western-backed country of South Korea. The North Korean invasion came as an alarming surprise to American officials. To them, this was not simply a border dispute between two unstable countries on the other side of the globe. Instead, many were afraid this was the first step in a communist campaign to take over the whole world. For this reason, many believed not intervening was not considered an option. This was felt and shown in a quote by President Harry Truman when he said, "If we let Korea down, the Soviets will keep right on going and swallow up one place after another." After this invasion took place in South Korea, General Douglas MacArthur was appointed Supreme Commander of the U.S.-led UN force sent to help the South of Korea. At first, the Korean War was a defensive one to simply get the North Korean communists out of South Korea. But it went very poorly for the Allied forces. The North Korean troops were well-trained and experienced, and the South Korean troops seemed to be flighty as well as under-trained. By the end of the summer, President Truman and General Douglas MacArthur had decided on a new goal in the war. Now, for the Allies, the Korean War was going to be an offensive one. Their new goal was to liberate or free the North from the communists. Initially, this new strategy was a success. The Incheon landing, an amphibious, which just means water, assault on Incheon, pushed the North Koreans out of Seoul and back to their side of the border. But then, American troops crossed the boundary and headed north toward the Yalu River, which was the border between North Korea and China, which was also a communist territory. So Chinese leader Mao Zedong sent troops to North Korea and warned the United States to keep away from the Yalu boundary unless it wanted full-scale war. This was something that President Truman did not want. He worried that if the war escalated to this scale, that the Soviets would become involved, which could potentially cause a World War III. General MacArthur, on the other hand, disagreed strongly with President Truman and felt that any de-escalation would be a loss to the war against communism, and therefore, in his opinion, freedom. As President Truman looked for a way to prevent war with the Chinese, MacArthur, on the other hand, did all he could to provoke it. Going against the president, MacArthur wrote letters and tried to raise support from Congress on his position. Due to this, on April 11th, the president fired the general for insubordination. In July of 1951, President Truman and his new military commanders started peace talks, although the fighting still continued during this time. In the end, it was decided that a stalemate had been reached and both sides were willing to issue a ceasefire. These talks took 2 years, but finally an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953. In this deal, South Korea was given 1,500 square miles more of land, and a new boundary was drawn. And between the two countries, a 2-mile wide demilitarized zone was established and still exists there to this day. And that is all we have today. As always, I encourage you to do more research on this topic throughout the week, learning about the Korean War, how General Douglas MacArthur affected it, how President Harry Truman affected it, and just continue learning through the week. So on that note, remember to be kind, follow God's will, and take care. Bye.